Five Nights at Freddy's started off as an indie horror game franchise that became quite a cultural phenomenon thanks to streamers and theory channels who pored over the sparse details the player is given about the complicated, horrific story that's going on largely behind the scenes over the course of the 9-game series. As the player, typically a nighttime security guard at one of the Freddy Fazbear's restaurant locations, you're a bit more focused on the possessed animatronic creatures that are hunting you down rather than trying to figure out the complete picture of how things got this way. Personally, I was unfamiliar with most of the storyline, only really knowing that there were some evil animatronics that would chase the player down, and that everyone online seemed to love it. But in preparation for the new Five Nights at Freddy's film, I decided to do a bit of a deep dive into the story of the game franchise, and I must say I was pleasantly surprised by how intriguing, cryptic, subtle, and honestly uncertain everything is. I watched 3 long videos going over the entire storyline for FNAF, and each of them had an entirely different sequence of events, with the authors of those videos placing many of the integral defining moments of the story at different points on the timeline. And that just really underscores how purposefully indirect the creators were with their information. Memories from the characters involved are relayed to the player via arcade-like minigames featuring 4-bit sprites. I mean, the name of one of the most important characters in the story, the protagonist of one of the games, was entirely unknown until people online solved a complex alphanumeric puzzle. And even this information isn't entirely confirmed by the creator Scott Cawthon as far as I know. So needless to say, there's a lot more to the Five Nights at Freddy's series than just the horror survival game that you see on the screen, and the intriguing details about the overall story, and the collective efforts to put together a vast puzzle that seems to have multiple possible solutions has left the franchise with a die-hard, heavily invested fan base. So taking things to the big screen was the obvious next step. But while FNAF has the fan base and underlying story to be a success on the big screen, those same 2 things present pretty serious hurdles for the movie to clear. Will a heavily invested fan base have higher than usual standards for a film? Will the story that we see play out be able to capture the same feeling of mystique and intrigue that the games have? Both important questions and ones that we'll take a look at, but first let's get a quick recap of the movie. So, here's your warning. Spoilers ahead. After seeing some unnamed security guard meet a grisly fate in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and this awesome intro credits sequence, we fast forward a bit to meet Mike, someone who's struggling to get a job and keep custody of his disturbed younger sister, fending off attempts to take custody of her by their aunt, who's basically Cruella de Vil. Mike eventually, reluctantly, takes a job offer from Steve Raglan as the nighttime security guard at a certain pizzeria inhabited by some familiar-looking animatronic creatures. But while he's there sleeping on the job, he finds that his dreams where he remembers his brother being abducted in their youth are more vivid, and there are 5 kids new to his dream that seem to know something. He also meets Vanessa while he's there, and she also seems to know something he doesn't. Over the course of the work week, things continue to get stranger, and Mike's little sister Abby comes to work with him out of necessity one night, where he finds that she seems to have a connection with the animatronic characters. Eventually, they turn on the pair, trying to kill Mike and turn Abby into one of them, by killing her and having her soul possess a similar animatronic suit. Mike saves Abby, for now, and goes back for his 5th and final night at Freddy's, where he's determined to reach out in his dream and get some answers from the children there, which he's suspecting are the 5 kids who went missing years before. When the animatronics attack Mike, he's saved eventually by Vanessa, who admits to him that she knew people were getting killed there, and that the culprit is her father. Then Abby gets lured to the restaurant by the ghost of one of the children, and Mike and Vanessa head there to stop them. When they arrive, Mike is confronted by Spring Bonnie, aka William Afton, aka Steve Raglan, aka Vanessa's dad, aka the man who hired Mike, and as we learn, the man who abducted his brother years ago. After convincing the animatronics, who are possessed by the souls of those 5 murdered children, that William was the one who killed them, they turn on William, causing his suit to malfunction and spurring all of the animatronics to spring back into place, killing William Afton in the same fashion as in the games, but not before he reminds them that he always comes back. We get a last shot of William, now to forever be known as Springtrap, struggling to stay alive in a back room, and the movie comes to an end. Well, we've reached that point in the video where we have to decide if this movie was a great watch or a hate watch. But we're saying this movie is a debate watch, in between great watch and hate watch. Bottom line, we think that for fans of the franchise, they'll really enjoy all of the references to the lore and the characters from the Five Nights at Freddy's world that they love. But without knowing all of that, other viewers are going to have a tough time really buying into this one. Thus leaving room for everyone to debate whether or not this was a good movie in their book. Thus the debate watch designation. In terms of reviewing Five Nights at Freddy's as a horror film, it's really not up to snuff in that regard. The very few jump scare moments there were all in the trailers, and it's hampered by its PG-13 rating, which precludes any real gore. And there's some creepy kind of scenes here and there, but they were sparse and hard to get invested in. And there's a fair amount of plot contrivances and hokey things about the movie on top of that. But if you are someone who is well acquainted with the FNAF universe, we think there's probably still enough here to let you look past the critical shortcomings of the movie and say, you know what? I'm just happy getting this live-action movie showing the thing I love and bringing these characters to life. And when I said references to the lore earlier, I meant there's a lot of references. Even a couple YouTubers who are famous for covering the games and theories therein had cameos. All of the animatronic suits looked fantastic, even if they didn't move around that much throughout the movie. They even added some new things to the lore, like the bite of the early 2000s, or whenever this movie is set. With the original Five Nights at Freddy's creator involved in the production, regardless of the quality of the film, you can tell that this was a love letter to fans, and we should celebrate when a fan base is respected and catered to, rather than when their favorite franchises get pimped out to others. And a good portion of the target audience seems to be just enjoying it. And while his part in this story and his motivations should have been explored more so the audience can appreciate who he really is, William's entrance as Spring Bonnie was great, and his robotic voice and suit were all done pretty damn well.
First I killed your brother, now I killed you.
But it just feels like there could have been more in this movie. More gore, more fear, more creepiness, more chaos, more usage of the security office as it's used in the games. With the story of the underlying IP and some great looking animatronics, this really has a lot of potential as a film franchise. Now this is a different continuity from the games, so there are some pretty big fundamental changes made to the characters. For one, the protagonist Mike Schmidt is no longer William's son as he is in the games, giving us a totally different dynamic. And William is made out to be an evil madman, rather than a complicated genius who went through some tragedies that exacerbated his depravity. And there's plenty of other things that do make this movie totally different from the games. But it's hard to say how stringent people will be with wanting the lore to be consistent, especially considering the creator himself made this one and explained that it's a different continuity. Now returning to our two earlier questions, will this movie satisfy fans, and can it maintain the same air of uncertainty in its storytelling as the games do? Well, first off, there are certainly people rating this movie pretty poorly, and it's hard to argue with them from a critical perspective. But when looking specifically at the fan base, they generally seem to be liking it more than they're taking issue with it. And for the style of storytelling, we think the movie does kind of bring up more questions than answers in that same vein that the expanded lore from the game does. So, to a degree, it does match the indefinite storytelling style of the games and related materials. Now, to anyone outside of the FNAF fandom, that's probably going to be a negative. But as they say, if you know, you know. Did you see Five Nights at Freddy's? If so, what did you think of it? Were you familiar with the games and the serious fandom surrounding this franchise beforehand? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to HateWatchers for reviews of other shows and movies. Thank you for taking this graveyard shift with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one, and
Happy Halloween.